I never thought a man could yell at a child like that. Not in front of me, not in front of my son, not for holding a fishing rod. But there he was, Derek Malone, 6'3", shoulders like a bull, vice president of our HOA, marching toward us like we were criminals trespassing on sacred ground. His voice thundered across the park creek like a warning shot. You, this is private property. Drop the rod and step away from the stream. My son, Luke, 12 years old, skinny, still grieving his mom, froze like a deer in headlights. His bottom lip trembled, his small fingers still wrapped around the reel, like it was the last good thing he had left. We weren't hurting anyone. We weren't breaking anything. We were just healing. And yet this man with his clipboard and power trip boots decided this was his moment to flex. That morning the world felt quiet, not silent, just soft. Birdsong drifted through the trees. Sunlight filtered down in streaks, warming the rocks by the creek like gentle hands. The water, clear as glass, moved with purpose, but without noise, curling around stones that had probably been there longer than our entire neighborhood. Luke sat on the edge of the bank, his sneakers dug into the earth. His little fishing pole rested between his knees, bobbing slightly with the current. He wasn't even trying to catch anything big, just being still, breathing. And me? I sat a few feet behind him on an old folding chair, coffee in hand, watching him more than the water. It had been 8 months since we lost his mom. 8 long, brutal months. There had been doctors, hospital visits, hospice, and then nothing. Just the echo of someone missing. Fishing had been her thing. Rachel loved it. Taught Luke how to bait a hook when he was 5. She said the creek was nature's pause button. I never understood that until now. This spot, tucked behind the community park trails, was the only place where Luke didn't flinch at sudden sounds, where he didn't ask me if I was okay 5 times a day, where we didn't have to talk about anything. We just listened to the water and remembered her. Then came the footsteps, heavy, purposeful, grinding against the gravel like a threat. I turned slowly, heart sinking before I even saw his face. And there he was, Derek Malone, striding toward us with that damn clipboard, his HOA badge swinging from his neck like a weapon. Step away from the water. The voice hit like a slap, loud, sharp, meant to humiliate. I stood up slowly, shielding Luke with my body like instinct. The man in front of us, Derek Malone, looked like he'd been carved from concrete. Military haircut, thick neck, arms folded tight across a black tactical vest that read HOA enforcement in bold white letters. Because apparently, that's a thing now. Luke turned his head, startled. His line bobbed in the water. We're just fishing, I said, keeping my voice calm, not hurting anyone. This stream is protected, Derek barked, stepping forward. You're violating HOA Regulation 12.6, unauthorized recreational use of restricted water features. He said it like we set fire to the playground. I blinked. It's a creek. It's a protected water flow inside HOA boundaries. That means it's not for personal use. He glanced at Luke, then back at me. Especially not for unsupervised children. My fist clenched. He's not unsupervised. I'm right here. Derek looked me up and down like he was measuring weakness. The rule's the rule. You'll receive a formal violation, and your son, his name is Luke, I said sharply. He ignored me. Is banned from creek access for 30 days. Next infraction, we escalate. Luke's pole dropped with a thud. His shoulders hunched as he reached down for it. But his hand stopped halfway. And I saw it. That small, silent shake in his back. The one he does when he's trying hard not to cry in front of a stranger. I didn't even catch anything, he whispered. His voice cracked like a twig underfoot. Derek didn't flinch, didn't soften, just scribbled something on his clipboard. And God help me, I wanted to rip it from his hands. But I didn't, because Luke was watching. Instead, I stepped forward, looked Derek in the eye, and said as evenly as I could, email me the violation. We're done here. Derek gave a smug nod. Glad we understand each other. Then he turned and walked away like he'd just won a war. I knelt beside Luke. His eyes were red, cheeks blotchy, but he wiped them fast, like he always does, like he's ashamed of feeling. Hey, I whispered, let's go grab burgers, fries, maybe even a chocolate shake. He nodded, not speaking, and as we packed up our things in silence, something settled inside me. It wasn't rage, it was colder than that, more focused. This man had made my son feel small, and I was going to make sure he'd never get the chance to do it again. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed beside the fishing gear we hadn't bothered to unpack, staring at the ceiling, my mind running in circles. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Luke's face, his mouth pressed into a tight line, his eyes blinking back tears he didn't want me to see. And the worst part? I couldn't even tell him it would be okay, because it wasn't. Not yet. By 3 a.m., I gave up pretending. I got out of bed, made myself a pot of black coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with nothing but the HOA welcome packet and my laptop. I've ignored a lot of things since Rachel passed. Bills, birthday cards, my own health, if I'm being honest. But I've never ignored injustice. And what happened at that creek, that wasn't just a man on a power trip. It was a message. We own this place. You're just a guest. So I decided to learn the rules of the game I never asked to play. The HOA bylaws were dense, overcomplicated, and clearly written by someone who thought the words accessory structure setbacks deserved a chapter of their own. But I've spent decades building software systems for banks. I know how to read between the lines. You don't survive corporate America without learning to spot buried landmines or loopholes. I read for hours, and then I found it. Section 8.3.3, Waterway Use and Maintenance, Conditional Designation, Pending Ownership Review. At first glance, it looked like a generic clause about irrigation zones, but buried in the footnotes was something bigger. The creek, our creek, wasn't actually owned by the HOA. It belonged to a land trust managed by the original developers of our neighborhood. The HOA had access, but only under a 30-year recreational lease that was scheduled to expire in 6 months. My pulse quickened. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I pulled up the county records, searched the parcel number listed in the bylaws, and sure enough, it was still under Meridian Holdings, not the HOA. No sale had ever been recorded, no transfer of title, just a lease, a temporary arrangement, which meant they didn't have the right to issue citations. They didn't have the authority to restrict access. And Derek, he'd just humiliated my son on land they didn't even own. I stood up from the table, walked to the sink, and splashed cold water on my face. My hands were shaking, not from anger, but from something else. Opportunity. All those years working in venture capital taught me a few things. Distressed assets are always the most undervalued. Control often hides behind paperwork. And sometimes the most powerful play is the one your opponent never sees coming. I sat back down, opened a secure browser, and started searching for contact information for Meridian Holdings. That's when I thought of Maria. Maria Santos had been a friend of Rachel's from college, now a real estate attorney with her own firm in Denver. She'd been at the funeral, hugged me tight, told me to reach out if I ever needed anything. I hadn't spoken to her since. Until now. I texted first, just in case it was too late at night. Hi, Maria, it's Ethan. Something's come up with the HOA here, and I think I've found something important. Can I call? She responded in under 3 minutes. Call me, I'm awake. And so, at 4:17 a.m., while the neighborhood slept under the illusion of peace, I sat in the dark and laid it all out. What happened at the creek? The violation, the clause in the bylaws, the lease expiration. Maria listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then her voice came, low and calm. You may be sitting on more than you realize, Ethan. Send me everything. HOA records, parcel data, lease terms, whatever you have. And don't talk to anyone until I've reviewed it. I thanked her. She told me to try to get some sleep. I didn't. Instead, I put on a jacket, grabbed my flashlight, and walked the gravel trail behind our neighborhood, all the way to the creek. It looked different now, not because anything had changed, but because I saw it for what it really was, a line in the sand. The HOA thought they could bully us into obedience, but they made one mistake. They did it in front of a man who's lost everything, except his child. And I don't have much left. But what I do have, time, money, and a very particular set of skills. That night, I made a quiet promise to myself. One Derek Malone would never hear coming. You wanted a war over a stream? Fine. But I'm not coming with fists. I'm coming with deeds, contracts, and signatures. And by the time you realize what's happened, you'll be the one banned from the water. Maria moved fast. Within 3 days, she'd confirmed what I suspected. Meridian Holdings was bleeding money. Their most recent development project had stalled due to permit issues and pandemic delays, and they were quietly selling off underutilized land to stay afloat, including our creek. According to Maria, the parcel had been assessed at just under $280,000, and while the HOA had expressed interest in renewing their recreational lease, they hadn't made a formal offer yet. They're stalling, she told me over the phone, probably trying to scrape together financing or push a special assessment vote through your HOA board. That gave me a narrow window, and I wasn't about to waste it. We set up an anonymous LLC, Creekstone Trust Holdings, and submitted a formal cash offer for $315,000 with a 7-day closing period and no contingencies. Meridian jumped at it. Desperation makes for fast paperwork, Maria said. You'll own the land by next Friday. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was tired and ready. For the next week, I said nothing. I didn't so much as glance at Derek when we passed him at the mailbox. I acted like the same quiet guy who just wanted a peaceful morning with his son. Meanwhile, inside Creekstone Trust, I was doing anything but resting. I hired a local environmental firm to assess the creek. The report wasn't surprising. Years of mismanagement by the HOA had caused minor erosion, increased chemical runoff, and fish population stress. Ironically, the very people who claimed to protect the creek were slowly killing it with cheap lawn fertilizer and overbuilt drainage systems. I had photos, data, soil samples, and something even more valuable: leverage. Then came the Saturday HOA event, a creek beautification initiative hosted by none other than Vice President Derek Malone. He'd plastered the community bulletin board with glossy flyers showing renderings of a new walking trail, decorative fencing, and a small pavilion for HOA events only. It was a PR stunt designed to rally residents behind the idea of spending tens of thousands in HOA funds to restore and secure the creek. But I'd seen the blueprints. The pavilion wasn't for community use, it was for private rental, and the fencing conveniently closed off the lower access point where Luke and I used to fish. Derek wasn't building a park, he was building a power symbol. The event was scheduled for noon. At 11:45, I parked down the street, put on a ball cap, grabbed my folder, and walked toward the crowd gathering under a large pop-up tent near the creek. Derek stood at the front with a megaphone in one hand and a clipboard in the other. His shirt sleeves were rolled, sunglasses perched high on his head, projecting the image of a man in command. I waited at the back until he said the words. And with your support, we'll secure a new lease from Meridian and keep this creek safe from irresponsible use. That's when I stepped forward. Too late for that, Derek. The crowd turned. Murmurs rippled like wind through leaves. Derek lowered his megaphone. Ethan, he said, all smooth authority, this is a closed HOA event. I'm sure it is. But here's the thing. I pulled a folded document from my folder and held it up. This land isn't HOA property anymore. The lease expired. The sale finalized yesterday morning. I let the words hang. No one spoke. Then I added, I own this creek now. Gasps, audible. Derek laughed, a hard, dismissive sound. No, you don't. County registrar says I do, I replied calmly. The sale was legal, the title is clean, and the property line includes 10 feet beyond each bank. I turned to the crowd. For those standing within that perimeter, I hate to break it to you, but you're currently on private property. A few people shuffled back instinctively. Derek stepped toward me, his voice lowered. This is a joke. You're bluffing. I handed him the deed. His face changed, slightly, but enough. Then came the real hit. I've already filed a cease and desist with the HOA attorney, I continued. Any construction, development, or event planning on this land without written permission is now considered trespassing. Derek's hand tightened around the megaphone. I kept going. And before you claim this is community property, let me remind everyone here that the HOA board never held a vote to approve lease renewal or land purchase. That means they were acting without member consent. A woman near the front, Mrs. Harding, retired schoolteacher, spoke up. Wait, is that true? I nodded. Check the minutes. No vote was ever called. Derek looked around, realizing, maybe for the first time, that the crowd wasn't on his side anymore. Not entirely. I'm not here to embarrass anyone, I said, lowering my voice, but I am here to protect what's left of this place. For my son, for your kids, for all of us who came here hoping for peace, not politics. I let that sink in. Then I turned to Derek one last time. You made him cry, Derek, for picking up a fishing rod. You crossed a line you didn't own. I turned to the crowd again. I won't be pressing charges for today's trespassing, but going forward, creek access will be governed by a new system. Fair, transparent, and open to families who treat this place with care. Someone clapped. Then two more. Within seconds, a wave of slow, almost unsure applause spread through the tent. Derek didn't say a word. He just stood there, mouth tight, fists clenched, watching the thing he thought he controlled slip right through his fingers. The following weeks felt like breathing after a long time underwater. The story of the creek sale spread fast. A few neighbors were skeptical at first, unsure of what it meant, unsure of me. But once they saw I wasn't building condos or fencing off access, things began to shift. I held a quiet meeting at the community center the next Saturday. No fancy slides, no HOA banners, just a table, a map of the creek, and a promise. No one will be fined here for teaching their kid to fish. Not on my watch. I laid out the plan. Creek access would be free, but managed by a small rotating committee of volunteer parents. A nature cleanup would be organized every quarter. We'd apply for a local conservation grant to restore the banks. And most importantly, every kid in the neighborhood was welcome. Except one group, the HOA board. They weren't banned, but I made it clear. Until a full audit was completed and a new leadership team was elected, they wouldn't be involved in anything creek-related. That didn't sit well with them, especially not with Derek. He tried to fight it, of course, threatened legal action, claimed I had manipulated the sale, that it was unethical and unneighborly. But when the title deed was published in the HOA's own newsletter, along with a cease and desist letter from my attorney, his fire started to fizzle. Then came the audit. Turns out Derek and a few others had approved several maintenance expenses without proper documentation. Lawn contracts awarded to cousins, a new sign for the front gate that cost 3 times market rate, a storage shed no one could find. By the end of the month, 3 board members had quietly resigned. Derek wasn't one of them. He waited until the night before the next HOA election, when the pressure became too much, and even his allies had jumped ship. He didn't say goodbye. He just posted a one-line resignation email and disappeared from the group thread. I didn't celebrate. Not really. This was never about humiliating anyone. It was about showing Luke that you don't have to scream to be heard, that calm can be louder than rage, that dignity, earned, not demanded, is stronger than any title or badge, and that sometimes the quietest people in the room hold the sharpest tools. The first real spring rain came early that year. Luke and I were back at the creek, same folding chair, same beat-up tackle box. The water was higher now, faster, but it still sang the same quiet song. Luke had grown taller. He didn't ask about Derek anymore. He didn't flinch when strangers walked by. Instead, he leaned his head on my shoulder and said, "Feels like Mom's still here somehow, doesn't it?" I nodded. She never really left. The sun broke through the clouds just then. A single fish jumped, scattering ripples across the surface. And for the first time in a long time, I felt it. Peace. Not just for me, but for all of us who had been told to sit down, shut up, and follow the rules, no matter how unjust. Not anymore. This wasn't just a story about a father and son. It was a reminder, for every quiet voice ever talked over, for every small act of dignity mistaken for weakness, that real power comes from patience, principle, and the courage to stand your ground. We live in a world where systems, HOAs, boards, organizations, often forget the people they were meant to serve. But stories like this are part of a growing tide, a wave of justice, led not by anger, but by integrity, not by noise, but by resolve. If you've ever been made to feel small in your own neighborhood, if you've ever watched someone misuse power and thought, Someone should do something. Let this be your reminder that someone might be you. And you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to fight with fists to make change. Sometimes you just need to know the rules better than the bully and have the strength to wait for the perfect moment to use them. This is one of many emotional stories that reveal the quiet heroes among us, ordinary people who choose principle over pride, healing over revenge. It's a heartwarming story, yes, but also a justice story, a lesson in grace, in fatherhood, in reclaiming peace without becoming bitter. If this story touched you, made you think twice, or gave you a new way to see the world, share it, leave a comment. Tell us your own narrated stories of unraveled fates and personal victories. You're not alone. Every view, every word, every shared experience adds to the larger tapestry of voices demanding better. Together, we build communities that heal instead of divide. Subscribe for more justice stories like this, because sometimes the most powerful justice doesn't come in courtrooms. It comes by a quiet stream where a boy learns to fish again.